So now you have listened to my colleague Ruard, who is officially, of course, also my boss, because he is the rector of the institute where I work. And now I'm going to bring us back to the Dutch story. Unless there are questions about the connections between what we talked about Monday and Tuesday and what Ruar talked about this afternoon. From the questions that you asked him, my impression was that it flowed quite nicely, one into the other. It deepened some of the ideas, but maybe if there are people who feel the need to discuss something before we jump into the Dutch examples. No? And this is the first time that nobody has a question. Yeah. Okay, good. Let's start then. I'm going to talk about two main examples from the Netherlands. Horticulture. Horticulture is a part of agriculture, which is the sort of specialized growing of vegetables, usually done in what you call greenhouses, and what I sometimes call glass houses. So both are the same thing. What in the profession is called covered growing. So you don't just grow it outside, but you have a way of controlling temperature and humidity, etc. Before going into that, what is important to realize is that in Europe, the Dutch are usually seen as the most frugal kind of persons, on average. Now, whether I'm a very frugal person, of course, is a different thing altogether, but this is about sort of national identities and cultural perceptions. Yeah, so the Dutch would talk about the French like, oh, they always spend so lavishly on food and drink, and they don't care about tomorrow. While the French would say, oh, these Dutch people, they're so serious, and they don't actually enjoy life. They just sort of work hard, and then they save money, and they invest it in their business, and they want good education for their children, and then they die, and they don't enjoy. So these are cultural perceptions. But within the European setting, the Dutch are often seen as a typical example of frugal, and that is very much true in the horticulture and the flower sector, which I talked a little bit about yesterday as already an example. This is how such a glass house or greenhouse looks in the Netherlands, and you see the flowers behind us, and this is a picture taken from a master course that I'm involved in the teaching. And we have our students from Africa, Latin America, Asia, whom we take to these sorts of environments. And then, of course, I want to talk about the local economic development and the value chains. And they are particularly interested in getting their Instagram pictures taken or for other platforms, so that with the flowers in the background, so that they can show that. And of course, both are important. Okay, so this is what it looks like, and if you look at the map of the Netherlands, this is the area I'm talking about now, where mainly this horticulture is taking place. This area is also the area where Rotterdam and The Hague and Leiden and Delft are based. So the three universities with this Center for Frugal Innovation are all in that same little area. Yeah, so when we go out for field work, so to speak, we take maybe 20 minutes in a bus, and then we are in an area with only greenhouses. And from these greenhouses, they export, for example, I don't know if you can see this. This is, no, it's tomatoes. Yeah. They grow in the Westland, they grow 54 different types of tomatoes, all different sizes, colors, different tastes. Yeah, in Saudi Arabia, they want the tomatoes to be sort of very red and tasty. In Germany, they want tomatoes to be big and watery. And in Italy, they want the tomatoes to be sweet and sturdy for their pasta sauces. And so everybody in the world gets their own preferred tomatoes from these greenhouses in the Netherlands. Yeah? And there is a place there that you can visit where we also take our students. It's called Tomato World. And this is an exhibition, a picture I took from that exhibition on the different varieties that they produce. One of the other things they always tell the students, and the students are always going like, is this guy serious? Yes, he's serious. That a kg of tomato seed costs more than a kg of gold. Yeah, so this is high-end stuff in a sense. Because with tomatoes, it really matters a lot which seeds you use for which kind of tomato you get. So if you want type 52 or type 28, you can't just sort of mess around with the seeds. Yeah, this is all very specialized sort of stuff. There are around 400,000 employees in that horticulture sector in that little bit of the Netherlands. And as we discussed yesterday, many of them nowadays are migrant laborers. And there are all sorts of issues with labor exploitation, etc. But still, by Dutch standards, this means this is a big sector. Yeah, if the country has 70 million people, you can imagine that 400,000 people working in that cluster is a lot for us. Also, the Netherlands, crazy enough, is the second largest exporter of food in the world after the United States of America. It's partly because we have limited number of people, so we can export a lot of what we produce. Of course, that's true. But still, on a relatively small piece of land, in these greenhouses with high productivity, we export lots of stuff. There's a little bit of bluff in these statistics in the sense that we also import food from different places in Latin America, for example, and then we re-export it, and they count that as well. So this is also one reason why we are so high in these statistics. Nevertheless, it is an important sector with around 8,000 growers in the horticulture sector. And we see here what you see globally, matters of concentration. So the number of growers is decreasing, number of entrepreneurs, but the size per firm is increasing. And this is also something already over the last 10, 15 years. These entrepreneurs are increasingly buying land in Africa and setting up growing facilities in Africa. Yeah? So increasingly, what we call the Dutch tomatoes are actually grown in Ethiopia and in Kenya. But we sell them as Dutch tomatoes to the Germans. Yeah, this is sort of globalization at work. In that process, it is important to recognize, as we touched upon yesterday briefly, the different phases in the production process. Some of them are very skill intensive, others are more labor intensive. Now the skill intensive phases, they keep in the Netherlands, at least until now. So how do you get from the seed to the small plant? Yeah, the initial stages, they do that in the Netherlands. Then they ship these small plants to Africa, where they grow them further. Where labor is cheaper, where electricity is cheaper, where the sun shines more, so you need less electricity to start with. To make a link to frugal innovation, we did a course with some 15 of these entrepreneurs last year on frugal innovation. Well, we called it somewhat differently. If I translate it directly, we called it simple innovation. Because which entrepreneur would have time to come to a course on something a word that they had never heard of before, after all. But this course was promoted by the local agency for organizing things. I will come to that in a minute. And we had 3 evenings with these entrepreneurs. And the interesting thing was that they thought that they would never actually be able to be an innovator, because they all felt that, well, we are just small family business people. We don't innovate. We don't have a lab. We just do things. And we said, yeah, but maybe take a little bit of time, discuss with some of the others, because the other entrepreneurs were usually from different stages in the process. So they could freely talk. Most of them actually did. And they came up with interesting new ways of doing things. Yeah? There was, whether we call these innovations then frugal is a different matter, but there was, for example, one innovation that was sending plants per mail. And they developed in the second evening a sort of a way of packaging 3 small plants in an envelope, sort of a cardboard kind of envelope that could just fit into a normal Dutch postal box, sort of at-home environment. And they had discovered or found a way to keep the plants well enough to survive, let's say, 48 hours in that envelope. Because nowadays in the Netherlands, the postal services only come every other day, which is one of the reasons why lots of things are not going by mail anymore. But it was really interesting to see that if you would take them out of their normal habit and get them to actually do something together, that they came up with things that I recently heard that for one company at least, this is becoming a new business model. That this sort of plants by mail, also on social media, has become a kind of a hit. So that you can send somebody maybe 3 roses with Valentine's Day, but the roses are still small, but if they arrive on time, you can yourself sort of let them grow a bit. And, so that's the sort of the context of the horticulture sector in the Netherlands. This is the World Horti Center. That's the organization that I referred to just now. I have a YouTube video. I'm not sure whether that will work. Is there a chance that this might work? It is a promotion video, so you have to take that into account. It is a promotion video through an American news agency that is explaining to American viewers what these crazy Dutch are doing. Yeah? Because it's greenhouses, it's round the year. There's not one day lost. Because they have computer systems controlling temperature, humidity in these greenhouses. So it is every day is as if it is the perfect summer day to grow your tomatoes, 365 days a year. So this, of course, is one of the ways in which they are able to be so productive. Yeah.
Did you see the tulip they are growing on India Gate in Central Delhi, in Delhi?
No, I haven't seen that.
Yeah.
Tulips?
Tulips.
All right.
So we have a tulip festival in Delhi.
Okay.
The tulips are provided by the embassy of Netherlands.
Of course.
So you must go and because there is a very interesting aspect that most of the budget of horticulture budget annual they're spending on the tulips.
Okay, okay. Well, and the tulips, of course, are a Dutch invention. Eh? I don't know if you know that, but I think it was in the 17th, 18th century that the Dutch invented tulips. They say it may actually be that they come from Mexico or India. I don't know, but there
are big tulip gardens in Kashmir.
Where
we haven't had any Dutch connection in Kashmir so far. At least, the written history of that time.
Well, there are, of course, always many people who claim a particular kind of invention. So it may well be that the Dutch have built their reputation on being the original.
No. I have seen it in the wild land. I mean, it's not that garden which is I'm talking about.
It's 17th century tulip thing that is related to tulip mania or something?
Yes, correct, correct.
Sorry?
It was linked to the tulip mania, which was one of the things in the pick cycle that tulips became very popular at some point, even though people didn't know what to do with them, but they were quite valuable. Then everybody started to buy tulips, and the market crashed.
They were trading them for one after the other. And
Yes.
They were not
Yeah.
tulip, only the price.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, there are famous stories about the Second World War when people actually ate the tulip bulbs, but that was because there was no other food available. So yes, it can be eaten.
And they survive.
And well, most of them survived, yes, but it's not recommended. So you don't grow tulips for their nutritional value, so to speak.
And not for oil too.
Sorry?
Not for oil too.
And no, not for anything, just for the beauty of it. Yeah, yeah. And then every year they come up with new colors and combinations of colors. Yeah, of course, you have the traditional ones like white and red and yellow, and nowadays blue and black. But you also have all kinds of combinations. So there are companies in the Westland, in that region, who specialize on bringing out new varieties of colored tulips. Just imagine that can be a business. Yeah, that can only be a business in an area where everybody is doing this sort of stuff, so there is place for such a niche. That I must admit I don't know, but it wouldn't surprise me at all. Yeah.
That's just like what they do on the farm.
Yeah, they do it on the
Somewhat
farm.
Similar to what farmers do in India.
Interbreeding.
That kind
Yeah,
of thing.
it's sort of crossbreeding kind of work.
It's not that difficult to introduce colors.
No, it's not that difficult. But what is difficult is assessing the market potential for a particular combination of colors. So these companies, most of their work is not so much in making that thing, but in assessing whether it will sell. So you would need to know, for example, what in the Christmas fashion for next year, what are going to be the trendy colors for clothing and for doing your Christmas tree. And then you could match that with a color for your tulips. So that's the sort of trend watching. That's what these people do.
So do they shape the societal view also using advertisement or
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. That's definitely part of.
manipulating people's psyche?
Well, this is where AI starts coming in and where these algorithms come in. Yes. But of course, these smaller companies are simply trying to catch on to the waves of what the big trends are, so that they can sell their particular issue. Is there a chance of this going to work? Yes. Yeah, there it is. This is the news lady from the American television. So we're almost there, I think.
Estimates that by the year 2050, the world's population will grow from today's 7.5 billion people to nearly 10 billion. And as natural resources like farmland and water become scarce, feeding everyone will become an even greater challenge. In tonight's signature segment, News Weekend's Yvette Feliciano reports on how there might be a solution well underway in the Netherlands.
In a world where the population is growing fast and the world will become more occupied than ever, we face several big challenges. Described by the UN, we have 17 sustainable development goals to transform our world. A massive amount of people living on our planet will need more food than ever. And with a growing population, the space for food production will be scarcer than ever. Production has to increase, but also so does the quality, because that will influence the amount of healthcare people need. Just behind the water barrier, for which the Dutch are famous, lies something that might be as spectacular as the Dutch waterfront. In a country with 17 million people,
These are the glass houses.
1,000 kilometers, The Netherlands is the #2 exporting country for food behind the United States, and the #1 for flowers, bulbs and trees. How on earth is that possible? With the approach of the horticulture sector in the Netherlands, we're working on solving 7 out of 17 of these problems. And the good news is, we're moving fast. We present World Horticentre, the leading innovation centre of the international greenhouse horticulture sector. It's based in the middle of the agricultural centre of the world, a platform where all aspects of horticulture come together. With the World Horticentre, we give everybody who is involved or interested in horticulture a place to meet, explore, research, invent, create, cooperate, and to find a new path. A unique chance for everybody who wants to join the wonderful world of horticulture. World Horticentre wants to be the most important innovation centre of the international greenhouse horticulture sector, as well as a leading platform for innovating, connecting, creating, and inspiring business, education, and government. World Horticentre is a place where we can beat the challenges of the future, and you're welcome to join.
So there is a big discrepancy, there's a big difference between the framing on the one hand and the practice on the other hand. But still I wanted to show you this picture of how the Dutch present themselves to, in this case, an American audience. That, wow, look at these crazy people behind the dike. Because the, oh yeah, I'll come to that later. You know about clustering, right? Yeah, maybe I can just skip this slide. I think for most of you, you know about, do you?
Maybe not, maybe you can briefly discuss that.
Briefly?
A minute or two. Yeah.
A minute or two, okay, well then. The importance of clustering is, first of all, that you have both a sectoral but also a geographical concentration. Yeah, so these companies that are doing similar things are all in the same place, like in the Westland, in this example. Often they start with cultural, social, religious commonalities, particular groups of people that are in that business. And this is maybe these two are probably the key ones. There's at the same time fierce competition, but there is also selective cooperation. Now what does that mean? They compete among themselves about making maybe the best tomatoes, for example, but they work together in internationally operating in selling these tomatoes. And they work together in getting the inputs for the tomatoes, like fertile soil and chemical inputs, etc. There they team up, because on their own they're relatively small, but they can get economies of scale by actually buying inputs together. Yeah? Now that's a key element of this clustering story. The other one is the specialization and interfirm division of labor, as it is called. This is this idea that you have these different stages in the processing that can be done by different companies that specialize on that particular thing. Now suppose I was talking about shoes, I'm not, but suppose. With shoes, the production of the upper of the shoe and the sole are two completely different things, usually happening in different factories. Yeah? But in state-led countries, usually they put it under one label. But in a cluster, you would have different companies doing these different parts of the production process. And that specialization helps to become more productive and more competitive. So as a cluster, they can be very competitive, even though the individual companies are relatively small, family businesses. Then you also have, because of the fact that everybody is near together, knowledge spillovers and exchange, supporting industries. There is, for example, a company in the Westland that that only produces biological deterrents for pesticides, for pests. Now, these biological deterrents, this company is the leading company in the world on producing this niche product that is an important input for the high quality sector. Yeah? And this is also a company now with affiliates all around the world. And you have a geographically pooled labor market, so that workers are relatively more specialized. Moreover, in that World Horti Center, where is that? Here, this one. There is also there are training institutes inside here at different levels, from academic to vocational training, on horticulture. Nothing but horticulture. Yeah, there's a whole set of people from, let's say, 16, 17 years onwards that are there learning the tricks of the trade and seeing how other people are doing things. Inside this building you have startups, you also have demonstration opportunities of new kinds of things that have been happening. And that helps to consolidate the tacit knowledge in such a sector. Okay, that was maybe 3 minutes or 5, but then on SME clusters, there is a famous example from Italy. Is Benetton a famous brand in India also? Yeah? Okay, good. Because people often think that they must have a big factory somewhere. Well, they don't. Benetton products are all produced by small family businesses in the northeastern part of Italy, at least traditionally. Nowadays, much of their stuff comes from Vietnam, from Indonesia, etc. But it's all based on small, medium-scale enterprises that specialize in different bits of the process. So if you get a shawl from Benetton, it comes from a very different factory than if you get a shirt or a pullover. Yeah? What Benetton does is they bring it all together, and they have people thinking about what is the color for the next season, which sizes can we sell in which countries, should we have more advertisements on television in India or in the US, or etc. That's what they do, not the actual production. So this sectoral and geographical concentration you see in lots of things. Footwear is one example, but this is another example. China. I once visited this town, Baigu. If you ever get a chance, go and visit Baigu. Well, there are lots of cities like this in China, actually. Baigu is the luggage capital of the world, as they call it. So, whatever brand of luggage or trolley or rucksack or whatever you buy, 90% of all of that comes from this one town in China. Whether it is L06 or Tumi or, well, all these brands are here. 90% of global production of all of this stuff is in that one city. And we've been driving around there. Every second house produces something in that complete set of luggage equipment. But for example, there is a whole street where they only produce these wheels for these trolley stuff. Yeah? This is what they do. That's what they specialize in. And other companies come there to buy wheels. Okay, that's clustering for you. Now back to the Dutch horticulture. How can they remain competitive, resilient, and sustainable? Because there are a number of real big challenges at the moment. One is the increased regulation because of the CO2 emissions in the agricultural sector more generally. and the fact that the horticulture sector uses enormous amounts of gas, natural gas, liquid gas, to heat the greenhouses to that ideal temperature, as if it was always summer with good humidity and temperature. And that gas was always subsidized by the Dutch government, so they could get it cheap. But perhaps you know about the Dutch story of the gas in the north of the country, and there were some earthquakes, and people started complaining, and now the Dutch government has decided to stop getting the gas out, which suddenly means, in combination with the Ukraine war, and that we don't buy the gas from Russia anymore, at least not officially. We buy it under the table, but that liquid gas has become much more expensive, and we have started to become more aware of the environmental consequences of using that gas. But for the business model of these horticultural people, this is a big change. Yeah, if let's say, I think it was 60 or 70% of their costs are heating. Now, if that cost is doubled overnight, what are you going to do? Yeah, so that's a major crisis. Smaller farmers have really low profit margins nowadays, which is partly due to the fact that supermarkets and wholesalers have increased their power in the value chain. Now, this will be a familiar story, I think. We all know how the big players in these value chains sort of squeeze the smaller suppliers. Well, that's also true for this group. Then labor exploitation and environmental sustainability. I have talked about that yesterday, I think. What I wanted to mention here is a slogan that I learned from a colleague of mine who unfortunately passed away at an early age. It's running to stand still. And he used that phrase for the competitive game that these sort of suppliers are in. Because tomatoes are also produced in Spain and in Italy and in India and everywhere. So in order to remain competitive, you have to improve because others are catching up. And that is what he called running to stand still, in terms of standing still in terms of your relative competitiveness. You can only keep if you keep moving to enhance your productivity. And because everybody is doing this, this is a tough game. Okay, that's the horticulture. Then I want to talk a little bit about water, the other story. I'm not sure this is clear enough, but this is a picture from 1953 in the Netherlands. The dikes broke in the southern western part of the country. You may know, this is one of the few things that most people know about the Netherlands, that much of the Netherlands is below sea level, right? I was always told already 30 years ago, this is what children learn in school about the Netherlands, it is below sea level. And there was one guy who put his finger in the dike to prevent it from flooding. Well, I can tell you that story is a myth. Yeah, it's a nice story, and there are several places in the Netherlands where there are memorandums of that, where you can visit the place where this was supposed to have happened, but that's only for tourists. Yeah, all the Dutch know that this is a great story, and it has helped our tourism business, but this major flooding was real. So the dike broke through in 1953, and since then the Dutch have been busy for decades to come up with systems of new dikes and warning systems for flooding, etc., that have made water management a key skill of the Dutch internationally, what we are recognized for also, yeah, and what we sort of promote. It is not a coincidence that our king, who is not a very bright guy, it seems, what people tell us, of course I don't know, but he does have a degree in water management. And that also is something that is always being used by people in the water sector internationally. Yeah, so this is where we think back of the Quadruple Helix. This is how they use the government, but also the royal family, as a promotion tool for the business in the water sector. Yeah? This guy is our special envoy for the water sector. And this is a headline from the Indian Express. I tried to Google yesterday evening, can I find this in the Indian news? Well, it was there in 2019. Water can really be a leverage mechanism to help build sustainability and development, the Dutch special envoy to the UN. And it goes on that he tells us that we are the experts in how we develop, and our water authorities are almost 1,000 years old. So we know. Yeah? Don't tell us anything about water, we will tell you. That's the basic message. And this guy is a national figure in the Netherlands. Everybody would be able to tell you, oh yeah, we know him. And he helps Dutch companies get orders. So he travels, let's say, to Brazil or to Bangladesh, for example. One of the best customers of the Netherlands is Bangladesh, where flooding, of course, is a seasonal issue. And the Dutch get all kinds of assignments. For example, this company, Van Oort, on their website, this is their slogan: using our Dutch roots to find ingenious solutions. This is how we improve the world, by showing our Dutch expertise. Now, if I think back of what Ruwaard was saying about different kinds of knowing, yeah, this is very much in the area of pushing your own thing and pretending that you are the expert, so to speak. And there is no room for doubt. Just ask us and we will come and solve it for you. And in that way, in that helix, yeah, all of these things come together. This Van Oort is also a family business in the south of the country. And if you visit their headquarters, I have done that a couple of times, you see these pictures on the wall of the grandfather and the father and the son, who is now the CEO, and then there are his children who are now in Harvard and Stanford and etc. Yeah, so that's how these traditions are being built. Okay, conclusion. Because I think it's also time to move to the second speaker. The Dutch came a long way with their consensus model of building these quadruple helix. There was a point where even Bill Clinton announced this publicly as possibly the third way, and the third way was meant as in between capitalism and communism. Yeah? And it was at that point also quite popular in an international sort of diplomatic environment. Like, how do these Dutch do that? That they don't fight, but they get things done. Well, I've tried to make the point that there was a lot of fighting and struggling initially. It did work for a particular period. Now we are seeing the downfall of it again. So it was temporarily, and it was selectively. Some people were dropped out. And the present challenges are, once again, increased competition, especially from Asia, mainly China, but not only China, in horticulture and water, for example. Overstretched family networks of these trusted insiders. How can you further grow and expand when your family size gets smaller and the number of people that you trust is not increasing? So how does this work out? The labor exploitation I talked about with the migrant laborers, environmental sustainability challenges. I mean, in a way, it's crazy that a country like the Netherlands, where the temperature is usually not above 15 degrees, and at the moment it is -2 in the daytime. But in these greenhouses, it is always 22 degrees. Now, that is not very environmentally sustainable. Yeah? So it's a business model with a clear, finite future, in a sense. But that intricate know-how about, for example, seeds or biological ways of treating pests, or other sorts of things about the technology in these greenhouses, that of course can continue as a business model for some of these companies, but probably not the production itself. And finally, again, that point of running to stand still, that your competitors are after you. It always reminds me also of a Dutch lady who won a gold medal at the Olympics, and then 4 years later, she again won a gold medal. And she was interviewed, and somebody said, "Yeah, so it's easy for you. It seems that you just win one gold medal after another." And she said, "Well, the first gold medal was maybe easy, but the second one is much more difficult, because for the last 4 years, all my competitors have been trying to get as good as I am or better to beat me." And that sort of sense of being haunted, maybe too strong word, but being chased by the competition is a very important dimension also of these sort of stories. And I think the Dutch in these sectors have been successful for 20, 30 years in staying ahead of the competition, but I think that the moment is coming closer and closer that left and right other clusters and other groups are going to overtake them, at least when it comes to the basic production of, for example, horticulture. That's it for the story on the Dutch experience. Are there any questions on this now? Yes, Sharadini.
You know, we are often told these stories that when companies become less competitive but very big, they try to control the market by making favorable regulations.
Yeah.
So, where do these firms stand vis-a-vis that?
Very badly in their perspective, in the sense that because they are relatively small family businesses with little or no political influence, even in a small country like the Netherlands, let alone in the global markets where they are operating, they don't have any of that. Except now, maybe in Dutch politics, there is a new political party that is specifically coming up for farmers' interests, who are now also part of the new right-wing government in the Netherlands. But even for them, it is proving now quite difficult to actually deliver on the sorts of things that they said in the election campaign. But on the whole, for the last 30 years, they always remained under the political radar. And that also means that, except for, let's say, international missions and being promoted by the king or whatever, but no political influence, no visible political influence whatsoever. So definitely no regulatory efforts to protect their markets. Also because, well, like I mentioned in the beginning of the horticulture story, most of the production is exported.
Yeah.
And in these other markets, they don't have that kind of bargaining position. So in that sense, it's quite different from, it's maybe a disadvantage of clusters more in general, that power dimension that big firms can mobilize often remains absent in the situation of clustered small enterprises. Yeah. But it's a good question.
So, all the horticulture sector is driven by SME, small industries, and also you have dairy farmings.
Yeah.
So, these are also global market is there, and they have good presence in India also.
Yeah, and the dairy market also consists of basically outgrown family businesses. They are a bit larger than these horticulture producers, because the dairy farmers need a bit more space for these animals, but also those are relatively still family businesses. Also in the dairy sector, by the way, you know, most of the Dutch milk nowadays comes from Nigeria. But it's being exported as Dutch milk because it comes from Dutch cows that are fed Dutch fodder, which are influenced by Dutch technology, and they get their Dutch vaccinations to get that cattle to produce the kind of output that is required.
So does this arrangement also benefit the other countries like Kenya, not in sense of
You have to take the mic.
So my point is like the spillover effect. Is there any spillover effect for Kenya in terms of technology, or it just remain a very close-knit setup?
Yeah, it is essentially a close-knit setup, but for example, nowadays in Kenya, but also in Colombia and in Ethiopia with flowers, where they have been producing there already for maybe 10, 15 years, slowly but surely that technology transfer is starting to take place. And that has to do with the fact that they have, let's say, subcontractors at local level, that once they've been working together for maybe 10, 15 years, there is a new kind of relations of trust that can develop, not with everybody obviously, but with a few preferred suppliers. And then slowly but surely these suppliers can start also doing more knowledge intensive activities and are trusted with relative new technologies or new ways of producing. So there is a spin-off, but it is slow and it is step by step. And it
Be a new challenge in the future.
yeah. I think if you would approach this from the perspective of, let's say, local economic development, how do you promote economic activities in, for example, in Nigeria or in Kenya? We could do much more in terms of trying consciously to promote a faster transfer of knowledge and capacities, which is not happening through policies at the moment.
I'm saying in terms of Netherlands economy, it would be a new challenge.
Yeah, also.
New competitors.
Yeah, there will also be new competitors, but I think in the Netherlands most people have already come to the conclusion that these production activities have to be phased out anyway. And that the future of the Netherlands is in a knowledge-intensive sectors that may be linked to horticulture, for example, but not are about the actual growing of the tomatoes anymore. But it's about these things around it. But there, it's primarily the Chinese that are chasing us, to use Sardindu's word. And they are chasing us hard. Yeah? I remember once in the World Horti Center, there was a delegation from China. And the people in the Horti Center were really nervous, but they wanted to sort of be open and give them a chance to come and visit. And these people were taking photographs of everything. And and the Dutch were really nervous, really nervous. And then at some point they had a Q&A session, and there were a few Chinese who spoke English. I think all of them, but they didn't want them to know. So they got their questions translated through somebody. And then at some point after that meeting, I spoke with one of the entrepreneurs of producing greenhouses. And he said, I am even more worried now than I was before this meeting. I said, why is that? He said, the quality of his question indicated to me that he already knows 90% of what we're doing. And he's trying to figure out that last 10%. And I tried to give him a fuzzy answer, but I could see on his face that he was already knowing that I was trying to sort of fuzz around it. So that worries me a lot. Yeah? And of course, we all know that once the Chinese get their act together and they've decided that this is a sector that they really want to get into, and they flood into the big finances, then also the Dutch are not going to be able to compete with that, probably. At least not in the more labor-intensive activities and in the more mass market segments. So the Dutch are in for a tough ride on that.
One last question by Ali and then one.
Thank you for the session, sir. It looks very nice when you talks about the productivity using the greenhouses. And fortunately, I am from Ladakh, and we have an organization there. In fact, that's a national organization, Defense Research Development Organization, and that DRDO is designing new technology for the greenhouse gas. Greenhouse, those things are glass houses. My question is, then comes the question of health hazard and the health issues, and it comes in the research papers that use in the greenhouse, especially in the region like Ladakh where sunshine is more and more, that comes the skin problems, respiratory problems. Workers who are doing much of work there inside the greenhouse gases, they are facing these kind of things. Chemical exposure is another issue. Then there comes the disease kind of things, like we have the tobacco mosaic virus that's often seen in the greenhouses. And then how you balance and how do you see that sustainability issue using greenhouse production, for example, we say, and on the other side keeping this quintuple helix or the quadruple helix where we are considered enormous the nature. So then comes the sustainability issue, and WHO and many organizations are vocal regarding the health issues and the sustainability. So how do you see this?
Yeah, I see it as unsustainable, basically. And I think I've also tried to make clear that I don't see much of a future for greenhouses in a place like the Netherlands in that sense. Because however well you try to organize it, it doesn't make sense. The basic logic doesn't really exist. In the present day and age, in the 1950s, when they started with this, it was a different matter, because there were food shortages all across Europe. Nobody was at that time even thinking of maybe we can get tomatoes from Africa or Asia. Out of the perspective in those days. So then it made sense with the cheap gas that was sort of just flowing, and we were all going like, oh wow, yeah, so what are we going to do with all that gas? And nobody was worried about health implications that you would only see after 10, 20 years maybe. So in that sense, we have changed a lot in terms of our expectations and aspirations of what would be seen as good employment, what would be seen as good working conditions, and what are sustainable business practices. But with the eyes of today, this greenhouse sector in the Netherlands doesn't make sense anymore. For Ladakh, of course, it's partly a different matter. Also, there are very different kinds of greenhouses and glass houses. You also have them in China, for example, plastic, which are much cheaper. But then the temperature regulation is a bit less precise. But a bit less precise plants can deal with, usually. Yeah, so, but then still, the hazards in terms of chemicals, etc., remain. Yeah. All right.
Maybe after, during the dinner.
All right.
So